Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Kate.
I'm Garrett, and today we're going to talk about Independence Day.
Woohoo!
But first, what is on the television?
Yeah, so we've both been watching The Days, which is on Netflix right now. And it is the story of the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. Did I say nuclear power plant
You
instead
did
of
say nuclear power plant, and I thought it was very funny.
yeah, the nuclear power plant disaster that happened in 2011 after the earthquake and tsunami.
Yes, so I really like this show. Um, I thought it was something, an event that's happened in our lifetime that I think got a lot of media coverage at the time, but again, especially when I was growing up, I didn't pay attention to that, sort of the ramifications of what was going on. So it was interesting to see a dramatized version of those events and to like have a few key characters that are real people that we could like follow and see the story unfold through. Um, I really enjoyed it. I think it's worth a watch. It has some pacing issues where there's a lot of scenes of people talking about what to do and nothing actually getting done. And then scenes of lots of stuff happening very quickly. But I very much think that that helps like capture the anxiety and the stress and the uncertainty of all those people involved because this was really something that had never happened before of having a nuclear power plant where there's no real way to know what's going on and what's going wrong or why it is. Even now, they don't really understand the full extent of what happened, which is almost just as scary.
Yeah, the crux of it is that the power goes out to the nuclear power plant after the um, the earthquake and the tsunami happens, and the tsunami actually takes out and this all happens in the first like 10 minutes of the show. So I'm not spoiling too much. And it takes out the diesel generators, which then they didn't have a backup plan for what to do after that, and they didn't know what was going on inside the reactors, and they have to deal with that. Um, and this is all in a background of a Japan that was hit by crazy tsunamis that killed thousands and thousands of people. And it really, this was one of the worst natural disasters that has happened in the last 20 years for sure.
Um, I think we kind of make a misstep if we didn't talk about Chernobyl with this, the Chernobyl show on HBO.
Absolutely.
Um, Now that show is a bit more dramatized. It has a bit more of a story structure with like characters who go through like very definitive arcs and kind of like what they believe, how they believe in their government, things like that. Um, and in many ways, I think that show, miniseries, is a lot more accessible. They do a much better job, I think, of explaining what's going on, what things are, why this is a problem, how it was solved. Um, Whereas this, I think, is quite a bit more immersive because you follow around a limited cast of characters. It's also interesting to see from both sides of this issue how the different cultures like interact and behave. Uh, in Chernobyl, there was a lot of like self-sacrifice and people like doing what's best for um, their country and the world at large, and that happens a lot in the days. But there's a lot more like safety concerns and a lot more like worry of the individuals there, so that way they can keep working, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the dynamic between the difference between Soviet Russian, mentality versus a Japanese culture mentality of the government and also the corporation and work conditions and sticking by your post. All of those kinds of things were very much in the forefront of both series, and they really show the two different cultures very differently. As would, if they were to do a similar program about one of the either English or American nuclear incidents, then that would show a completely different kind of work culture. Um, and especially given like how both of those incidences happened in real life.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed Chernobyl, I would say check this out on Netflix if you still have it.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing, I want to hammer home on this one is that you talked about the pacing as being kind of a negative, but for me, the pacing of this show and the same thing I felt with Chernobyl was that it creates a absolute sense of panic in a lot of the scenes where, I mean, and if you are not somebody who likes to watch horror movies or serious anxiety driven programs, I would say maybe stay away from this one because they create a sense of tension through the absence of sound and through the pulsing of the meters and the dripping of water, that really creates a sense that you know danger is imminent. And I mean it is, and it really is a great show. Both of them, I highly recommend both. I regularly watch Chernobyl again. It is definitely something that is watchable multiple times. Not sure about the days. I also wonder if we knew Japanese and could read a lot of the diagrams and like whiteboards, like maybe we would have a deeper understanding of what was actually going on there. But you know,
I
it,
yeah, I do think there were more than a few scenes where the translations were a little bit too casual. Um, I don't know how to describe it other than that, but like uh, I I think I think they did a really good job. A lot of the actors give really good performances where you can tell a lot of their like body language and like how they're feeling based on that. So even though we don't understand Japanese, we understand a lot of the intent behind the delivery.
yeah, yeah, and I think that it would have been impossible. Like the only way to do it would be to, CGI in a whiteboard that had everything in English instead of in Japanese, and that just would not be good. I remember when I was watching it, I actually texted you and I said, well, I know the Japanese characters for unknown really well now. And that has got to be the word that you do not want to see if you are trying to figure out what's going on with your nuclear power plant.
Yeah, yeah. I got that text. I was like, well, that's foreboding. And then I watched the first few episodes, and I was like, I too recognize this character set. Um,
Yeah, yeah. The bottom line of stepping into the unknown and really trying to problem solve. Yeah, it's a great show. Highly recommend. Go watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I really only have two negative things to say about it, and that comes down to the final episode. And one is they they have the Prime Minister of Japan talk to Obama, who was the president of the United States at the time. And in the first scene, well, Obama is just like a voiceless person on the other end of the phone. And then in the next scene, they have somebody who's doing an Obama impression, and it's not very good.
Yeah, man, it was so bad I didn't even realize that that's who he was supposed to be talking to.
I,
Yeah, yeah,
and the other being like there's kind of like a couple takeaways that I think it incites you to take away about nuclear power and things like that towards the end of the decommissioning of this nuclear power plant being in some ways positive that I don't necessarily think translate well to our world of we're burning mostly fossil fuels for our energy, and that's really a lot worse than the
yeah,
you know nuclear
yeah,
accidents we've had over the past
yeah.
100 years.
The amount of workplace accidents that happens in coal plants and in coal mining and in nuclear or in natural gas and gas mining, fracking, whatever they do to get the gas out of the ground. Those kinds of things are really terrible, and downplay those a lot. Like there's we in Pennsylvania, we talk about 3 Mile Island as being like, nuclear power plant, how that's so terrible. But at the same time, like in the end, yes, there was a little issue and it got cleared up and it was fixed and nothing bad has ever happened again. At the same time, also in Pennsylvania, we have an entire town that had to be, abandoned because the coal mine underneath it caught fire.
And it's still on fire.
Yeah, it's still on fire and it is going to be on fire for a very long time. And that fire could spread to other mines that are nearby. I mean, so in the grand scheme of things, yes, nuclear power has its dangers. And the bottom line, in my opinion, when it comes to nuclear energy and when it comes to, I mean, even after watching Chernobyl, the amount of care and seriousness that we put into nuclear energy is something that's often absent from all of the other kinds of energy that we use. And that's one of the reasons why we have so few accidents in nuclear plants, because everybody does treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. And I mean, this show makes it clear some of the ways that, that seriousness was not exactly followed in Japan. And I think that we can point to capitalism as being a big factor in that, things were rushed, things were not well planned. And in the end, the Chernobyl style reactors notwithstanding, we developed very early on a nuclear power plant that works really well, but we continually try and make it better and include bells and whistles that, that don't necessarily work and end up having issues. So, and that's purely because capitalism demands that each thing be better than the last, whereas, you don't have to, reinvent the wheel every 10 years. So that's my opinion on that.
Nuclear good, coal bad.
So
Um, I,
bad.
I've
So
I,
bad.
I've always thought that for every disaster movie or show that we could make about nuclear anything, we could make at least that many for that many and more for every oil pipeline, coal plant, oil rig fire. You
Hell,
know,
just the train derailment with chemical spills, those are just as bad. And while we talk about, poisoning the area with radiation, we as humans have been setting off nuclear bombs. I mean, think about how many nuclear bombs were set off in the world in the last 60, 70 years. I mean, the amount of radiation that we have, imbued into the earth through these tests is, it's astronomical. And we don't, complain about those when we talk about nuclear power plant incidences. And I mean, as they said in the show, just a tiny, tiny bit of uranium can power, you know, huge countries in Tokyo. So, yeah.
yeah, it's certainly something that I hope we see a lot more of in our future. Um,
But I doubt it.
yeah, I mean, we we often have a bleak view of what's going on in our world. Um,
Yeah,
but
we are in the darkest timeline, and I don't see a end in sight of that one. But you know,
yeah, to get to something a little bit lighter, Independence Day is our main
yeah,
event.
let's talk about aliens destroying the Earth instead of humans. Yay!
Yes. Um, so Independence Day came out in 1996, so just a little bit before I was born, and it's considered a turning point in the cinema landscape. It was an immensely successful blockbuster movie that really set the stage for a lot of the movies that were coming out in the late 90s and early 2000s. Um, to give some context here, it made $800 million worldwide, which is a lot of money. Um, it became the second highest grossing film, which before that was Jurassic Park, which is another one of at least my favorites.
It's a good one for sure.
And it was very quickly beaten out by Titanic that came out a year later as being like the just absolute megalith of a movie that it was. Um, the Independence Day also had a huge success on the home media front, selling 22 million copies, at least here in America, which is just a lot. There was also like tie-in toy lines and all sorts of stuff like that that help it generate a lot of money even after the fact. And one of the key reasons that Independence Day saw such a huge like surge in people going to see it um, was because during the Super Bowl 30, they paid $1.3 million to show a trailer, which was anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute at that time was how much this cost. And they showed a trailer for the movie to an audience of 94 million people. Um, so it was able to just have a huge reach. It had huge star power. Will Smith, who's really the star of this movie, was just coming off of um, his Fresh Prince fame and being in all these movies. So he was a huge draw for people, especially younger audiences. This movie came out in the summer, which is, helped cement it as the summer blockbuster. And that meant that, people were taking their kids. It's a very family friendly movie, if we want to say. There is, not huge, like, there's nothing too violent or offensive in it. Um, it's a well-rounded film. It also managed to make a lot of money with marketing deals. You'll notice a lot of Coke products and things like that strewn throughout the movie. And shortly after the movie, Apple, which was growing at that time, as was most technology, um, in the mid 90s, Apple did a promotion that showed Jeff Goldblum with his laptop that had the power to save the world. So this movie permeated a lot more than just cinema. It was all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, I read one of the marketing tactics they did. So it came out right before Independence Day. So, but far enough in advance that people could all go during the holiday weekend, so that it was already out. And one of the things that they did was they made fake commercials where they interviewed the cast about what it was like to live in a world after the alien invasion, which I thought was a hilarious marketing ploy.
Yeah, that reminds me of like the War of the Worlds and putting that on the radio and acting like it was a real radio broadcast or something like that.
Yeah.
And anything to like create some level of immersion and interaction, I think really promotes people to like be invested and interested in a movie.
Yeah. Well, and two, back then we didn't have, not everybody had cable. Everybody, rented movies from their local stores, and going to the theater was not prohibitively expensive like it is now. So you really did have a huge amount of people that were able to go see this and then go talk about it when they got back to work after the holiday.
Absolutely. Um, so in a little bit more to talk about like blockbusters and kind of what they were, I feel like nowadays we have a very skewed idea of what a blockbuster is. So the original summer blockbuster that a lot of people like cite as being the the blockbuster, the one that started them all, was Steven Spielberg's Jaws.
Ah,
And I think Jaws is fantastic. It's very fun. It's very exciting. Takes a bit to get going, but it cements that man versus nature appeal to the summer blockbusters, or man versus the unknown.
yeah, that's an interesting little fact, and I think that it's not important to note, but like significant that both of these movies took place during the summer. They come out in the summer. It's a, it really is about that, moment in time.
Yes. And interesting, this is one of the few blockbusters that didn't immediately spawn whole series.
Yeah.
Um, so Jaws had several films that came out later. Other blockbusters include things like Alien, and then that led to Aliens, and then some other movies we won't talk about. Um, Ghostbusters.
Alien 3 is not that bad.
No, Alien 3 is all right. After that, it
Yeah,
gets interesting.
well, and we'll talk about it later, but the CGI is really what kills Alien 4, so.
Yes. Um, and then obviously we have Star Wars, and that spawned its whole thing. And then getting into the 2000s after Independence Day came out, we had a whole series that were spawned. The Pirates of the Caribbean is a big one. Those were some of the most expensive movies ever made at the time.
Yeah.
Later we get into the whole like Marvel and superhero genre, and the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and all these series that just keep getting so much money and have a lot of
Forget
broad
about
appeal.
don't forget about movies like Fast and Furious too, which I think is closer to Independence Day in both its audience and in its, like action movie, level. And that, I mean, what are they on, 9 or 10 now?
Yeah, and those are again, huge star-studded casts and tons of people and lots of explosions and a lot of just action.
And in general, very fun.
Yes, I think one of the most fun movie-going experiences I have seen is going and seeing the Fast Eight and
Ha!
just being able to like be in a theater that it was pretty empty, but I was able to just like shout with excitement because Kurt Russell was in it, and I like Kurt Russell, and to just be able to go like, yeah, explosions, like it's
Yeah.
there is, I think I said this in our last in the first episode of just like there are movies where you can go in and turn your brain off and have a great time. And I definitely think this is one of them. There are a few scenes that like, we tune into. Um, so would you like to tell the audience how we actually watched this movie?
So, this movie, like so many of the other movies we've just listed, have been on cable. So channels like USA and TNT, this movie would be on, and we would see using the little navigation thing to see what's on what different channels, and it would be one of the movies where we would try and guess what scene was happening in the movie when we turned it on, depending on how far along it was, and it was a movie that was always on in the background. We've seen this, a billion times in our lives for sure.
Yeah, this Armageddon, which came out a couple years later, the Lord of the Rings movies, Shawshank Redemption, those sort of things. AMC was always a part of that rotation. Um,
It dawned on me you were asking me a different question though. How did we watch this today?
yes, yes,
We didn't actually watch it because it's not available on any of the streaming services that we have access to right now. So we just watched key scenes on the YouTube, which brought back plenty of great memories.
yes. So you may think, how on earth could you talk about a movie and not watch it? Well, it's one of those things that this is one of those movies that while it has many through lines and many like, character arcs and growth, it's not that interesting to talk about all of those things. Um, I feel like the big key scenes of the world being destroyed, Will Smith punching an alien, the alien telepathy, um, the President Bill Pullman's speech and Cousin Eddie destroying the aliens are key enough to be able to get a great sense of what this movie was about and what it means to us.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get started by talking about one of the most memorable things about this movie. Aliens, they come to Earth and they want to destroy us. Um, it's really only made clear that they want us for our natural resources, which kind of makes it strange as to why they would attack a, you know, planet with people on it instead of, Mars or Venus or Mercury that have nothing. Um, but
Yeah. That's one of the few scientific loopholes in the equation. But I mean, maybe they assume that we're gonna get our shit together and go after them eventually if they don't get us now. So, you know.
Right. So a bit of the history within the context of the film. The aliens that come to destroy us came before, and they landed in Roswell, New Mexico, and we found the U.S. government found them, did some science stuff, and didn't learn a whole lot because we have scientist man to explain everything that we know, and then our other protagonist, Jeff Goldblum, who's an MIT dude, plays chess and is really smart, and has a computer. He starts solving problems almost instantly.
Yeah, this is another one of those movies, and this was a trope that happened a lot in the 90s where down on your luck, a really smart person ends up saving the world. And, that it's inspirational for us plebs, but very unlikely to actually happen in real life.
Right. In this movie, we very much ignore a lot of the bureaucracy that would totally surround alien contact. There would be a lot of fumbling. Uh, Also, in the pivotal ending moments where the U.S. government is able to rally every organization in the world and all the people in the fighter jets is just as you know
Yeah, using Morse code too. They're very unlikely to work. That everybody would, you know, behave and listen and go along with the plan, even if the world was literally on fire.
yeah,
I think that if we could weaponize Morse code to be able to stop the world being on fire, we would have stopped global warming 20 years ago. But here we are.
right. Um, back in the 90s, we definitely did have the pressure of scientists to fix the hole in the ozone, and once we did that, we were like, well, we solved that one, so we're done listening to them. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that that speaks to um, a lot of mainstream science, especially coming from, the Cold War and astronauts being celebrities and things like that, of, the average person being able to pay a bit more attention to the scientists and what's going on. They took, more of a stage in the news. There were celebrity scientists like, Carl Sagan. He did a lot of tours, wrote a lot of books, had shows, things like that. Science was becoming more accessible to the average person. Um, which I think is something we'll talk about in the next segment as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it in the pre-YouTube and TikTok world of the echo chamber of creating conspiracies, I guess scientists were more accessible, and we believed them because we didn't have the detractors it as loudly.
Yes, at that point, the people who were denying the moon landing were, more so just random people that would have these ideas. They didn't necessarily have big forums and outlets where they could expunge their beliefs.
Yeah.
So to talk about really the first big scene in the movie when the Earth gets destroyed, unless you have anything you want to talk about before that.
Um, there's just a few little things that I think are interesting. One being that we do get this movie does a great job of introducing all the players that come together in the end, introducing them and following them throughout as they deal with their journey, and I think that's interesting. I also think that the scene where the alien ship rides over L.A. and Will Smith sees it for the first time. I think that is a really great scene. Is that where you were going to start?
Yeah, yeah, sure. That's where we can start. So, the movie follows about four main people. We have Will Smith, who's a fighter pilot. We have the president, who's the president, and kind of dealing with this. We have Jeff Goldblum, who's our cool, smart, attractive scientist man, and we have cousin Eddie, who's this drunkard crop duster who claimed to be abducted by aliens.
Yeah, that is about everybody that's important. There's some ancillary people, but they all hang out with those guys.
Yeah, so luckily this does provide us a few different perspectives on the entire conflict, from anyone who's kind of far removed, including Will Smith's wife in the film, and people who are, neck deep in the action, like the president. Um, I think it really helps to paint a picture of something that we'll see in other disaster movies of, this affects everyone. Um, and I think that's something that really inspires the call to action in the final act of the movie, where it's not just a America problem. It's everybody needs to participate. Everybody needs to be involved. Um, so you touched on the spaceships. So uh, this was 1996. CGI was really in its infancy. The first fully CGI movie, or what people say is the first fully CGI movie, Toy Story, came out a year before. Um, Only a few years before this, in 1993, Jurassic Park came out, and that was, huge and groundbreaking for its effects. Um, and this movie uses some limited CGI, but sticks to what was used before with a lot of miniatures. So the alien ships, there were a number of them built. The mothership that we see all the ships breaking off of was a huge miniature. It was about 12 feet wide. And the uh, alien spaceship that they attack and are seen blowing up buildings and things, that was a 30 feet wide, just huge miniature. And this is something we don't see really at all anymore, unless you're watching like a stop motion film or something that utilizes, like specifically utilizes a lot of practical effects. You're not going to see these sort of miniatures. Whereas, back in the 70s, Star Wars, that was the entire reason that was able to be made, is because they were able to fabricate these things. Um,
Yeah, and they do a great job of melding these new CGI techniques with the existing miniature filmography as far as miniatures go. And I think that for me, bad CGI is the worst thing for me. Like I can't watch Star Wars Episode One. It bothers me to no end for multiple reasons, but bad CGI being one of them. And I am somebody who will turn off a movie because I can't deal with the bad CGI. So in this movie, they did a great job of using the miniatures and in similar ways to where they had used puppets and things like that in some of the Star Wars and Star Trek movies in order to give a real, you know, effects in of the cities blowing up and the cars flipping over, and they just really did a great job putting this together and making it ultra realistic and almost like it had really happened.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key draws to that is uh, when they when the aliens eventually fire upon the world, we see them fire upon things that are very iconic, especially to America. Um, so the three big American things that were destroyed were the Empire State Building, which is incredibly iconic to movies and to, New York
Mhm.
and that kind of vibe. It's a really old building built during, I think, the 1930s or very early 1900s. It was one of the first big buildings in movies with King Kong and having, in the puppet stop motion King Kong climb up a miniature of the Empire State Building and swat away biplanes. Um, we've
Yeah,
had
and it's very interesting that they chose that building over like the Twin Towers, which in 1996 were still there. And I mean, I'm glad they chose the Empire State Building, but certainly an interesting choice. And I think that as Hollywood people tend to harken back to other Hollywood things, I do think there's a connection to cinema specifically with the Empire State Building.
yeah. Um, However, in that shot, and I think this is one thing that gets brought up, New York is laid out in a grid, and the Empire State Building is on that grid. It does not, it's not the end of a road, but it being on the end of a road, to center it in the frame, to have an explosion rip through a miniature city street, that is a lot more iconic. That's a lot cooler. Rule of cool. It doesn't matter that that's not really where it is. Um,
Wow.
that that shot is able to a lot better just like express the scene.
Well, and
Um,
I think that it points to the audience that they were making this for too, is that, the most of the people who are watching this movie are gonna be in the Midwest or the South or LA or California, wherever. They're not all gonna be people who have gone to New York, and they're not, New York people to be able to point that out because I mean, we know enough about, we're both miniature people, and we love miniatures and watching buildings. Like I've, made dollhouse things, and Garrett's done plenty of painted figurines and stuff. And it's easy actually to make a miniature that actually looks like an actual place. You don't have to do that much effort to do it. You just get a map and you plot it out. So, not making it look like New York is a very specific choice that they made, and it was done on purpose.
yeah, absolutely. So the next building is the White House, and the White House is incredibly iconic in American history. It really is a symbol of the presidency and government, all sorts of stuff like that. Well, the Capitol building is bigger, has a bit more relevance to our democracy. It's just as iconic, but having the White House being blown up, I think really helps tie you to the president's character and like showing him having just like everything around him falling apart. Um, so the White House miniature was 13 feet by 5 feet, just huge. They filled it full of dollhouse furniture so that way when they did blow it up with all these detonation charges, um, all sorts of shrapnel and things like flew out and bits of furniture did, so it would look more real. Um,
What
and
a
and
detail. That's an incredible amount of thought went into that.
Right, because in a later shot we see like an office building getting caught in the LA distraction, and it very much just kind of like explodes out, and all you really see is like this big frame, and
Yeah, it's less exciting, but on the other hand, that's kind of how that kind of building would explode if it was to explode.
right. But nowadays, if you have this scene, and you see this in damn near every superhero movie, Superman flies through a skyscraper, and then all these like papers are flying around. A filing cabinet gets thrown to the
Oh my
ground.
gosh. Is it Transformers 4 that has the skyscraper that like bends in half?
Sure, I don't know.
That's a problem. See, I can't deal with that. It's dumb.
Yeah, by utilizing these practical effects and these miniatures, you're able to, in my mind, create a much more realistic idea of what's going on, of an explosion, of a building being destroyed. Um, that I think sometimes in, more animated things, you can get too fanciful ideas of what happens.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
not to say that any of this is, in the scene where the Empire State Building gets destroyed, like pieces of the facade just kind of like fall off and forward, and like it kind of looks weird, but it looks real still,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
which
because
is really what we're getting at.
yeah, it's a physical thing that's being blown apart rather than a, a bunch of vectors.
Yes. And then the final building that we really see get destroyed is it's a bank tower in Los Angeles, which was at the time, and I think might still be the tallest building in California.
Hmm.
Um, and that one is very interesting to see destroyed because it's a big tall cylinder. And I think by choosing these buildings, they chose a lot of different like designs and a lot of different things that represent, America and humanity. The White House is an incredibly old and very old-fashioned neoclassical building. In terms of America, it is an old building. We don't have a lot of old things here. We destroyed anything that was here. Um, the Empire State Building was a big status of like industrialization and steel works and humans having this desire to build big things, and the Los Angeles helps cement the Hollywood angle, the business, the capitalism of being a bank. These institutions are all being destroyed.
Yeah, what a great scene. And, of course, because this is a exciting, a movie where things are happening and we have to care about these characters and they all very narrowly escape death.
Yeah, so we in New York we see one of Jeff Goldblum's coworkers. He dies in the explosion. But in Los Angeles, where we're following Will Smith's wife, they hide in a tunnel,
Yeah, like a culvert in a car in an overpass.
and their dog Boomer jumps in at just the right time to stop the explosion from singeing his fur. And
Very dramatic moment in cinema history.
reports from people who went to see the movie claimed that when Boomer is saved from the blast, or rather saves himself, the crowds erupted in cheer. Because if there's one thing we love more than patriotism, it is dogs.
For sure, that's the American psyche.
A 100,000, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions of people just die, but the dog lives, and that's what matters. Damn it.
It's easy to care about a dog. So the next big scene, if we want to move on to that, is when the president and Jeff Goldblum and all their company go to New Mexico to check out what they might find on the base there.
Yes. So between that, we have um, Will Smith gets in a fighter plane,
Oh,
and
yeah, forgot
uh,
about that. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that's okay. This is a minimal. This is a lesser scene where Will Smith gets in his fighter plane and they start attacking the fighters. They're unable to shoot down the big ships because they have like forced fields, but Will Smith is able to shoot down an alien. He parachutes out of his plane, goes to the crash site, and punches an alien in the face, which is excellent first contact.
Yeah,
Um,
truly
it's
a great moment of history. And you can imagine this really happening. Like that's for sure what would happen.
And we also get our first glimpse of the alien, which is just like this big like a hammerhead thing. It's very different than a lot of aliens we've seen in pop culture so far.
Yeah,
Um,
I thought that the creativity in the aliens' physiology was fascinating. It's not your normal gray man, but it's close. It's got big eyes, it's got long legs, it's got a big head, but it is shaped different, and it's different from like the aliens and
Star Trek's everything's just a humanoid with a different pigment of skin and like a prosthetic, you know.
yeah, yeah, very different from that. So I really liked how they made that alien interesting looking.
Yeah. Um, it's and then it was interesting to see once we go to Area 51, the aliens that they have in the jars that crashed from Roswell of being like in various states of mutilated and we once we see their technology, it's very weird to us, but it's all very like it form fits to them, which I think is very important when we talk about having realistic aliens and having like a culture that's very different and very built around themselves. I think that's something that the Alien movies did very well with the you know engineers and having the alien itself be very biological and weird and machine like. um
Yeah, that was certainly very, very well done.
and once we get to Area 51, we meet crackpot scientist man, um which is kind of the opposite of Jeff Goldblum's character of being cool, handsome scientist man that we've been following so far, who's been very calm and collected, doing things on his computer. He's also very well put together in that, he's doesn't have the wacky scientist hair or he's dressed as a civilian. He's much more easier to follow than the scientist that's been staying in Area 51 and doesn't get out much.
Yeah, it is clear he doesn't get out much.
And we learned that the president has really no knowledge of what's going on here at Area 51, which is something we're going to bring up in our next segment. Um, and we also learned that the scientists haven't learned so much as you might think that they would over 60 years of studying, this aircraft. Because Jeff Goldblum comes in and almost, instantly is able to like hook up with their system and like they're able to, eventually pilot the craft and make a virus that's able to like take down other crafts.
Well, part of that is that the spaceship didn't turn on until it came back into Wi-Fi range with its sister ships,
Yes, that is true.
which I think is a nice little detail, and it makes sense. I like the idea of the alien reconnaissance crew coming down and then, you know, getting stranded like Castaway.
That would be a much different perspective to like see that sort of event. Um, but yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so we then have a scene where we make contact with the alien that Will Smith punches in the face, and this is where we kind of get into the mythology of this alien, where it takes over the scientist man with one of its tentacles and is able to like speak through it to the other scientists, which is very different from a lot of like more traditional aliens of like your Star Trek where every alien can just speak the same thing. And this goes to show just how like foreign and strange and different and completely alien these creatures are when they have powers outside the capability of humans and outside of the capabilities of our machines.
Yeah, and it certainly increases the fear factor when you realize that, they have telepathy and they have, these other more advanced skills than just like talking about their spaceships and their weapons. So it ups that considerably.
Right, because even at this point, we were making, rockets and stuff, and we'd gone to the moon, and we had enough firepower to destroy ourselves 10 times over. But once you get to having a creature that exists outside of like the realms of what we can comprehend, that's where you get to the scary sci-fi, the cosmic horror. And so we learn in that scene that the aliens are here to destroy us and take the Earth's natural resources, which kind of strange, um, because there are, tons of planets and asteroids they could harvest for raw materials. Um, and coming back to cousin Eddie and his idea of, oh well, he was abducted at one point, you start to wonder if maybe the aliens are after more biological things. um, but then if they were, why would they destroy the huge population centers of Los Angeles and New York? And I think in another shot we see of like where they're at in Europe, of destroying London and Berlin and places like that.
Well, I think it's significant too, if we talk about, like alien lore, like most people who say that they've been abducted by aliens have been abducted from, rural places. So I think that, I mean, I'm not saying that that really happens, but I think that, the idea that if you were going to find out more about a culture, pick people out from places where they aren't going to be noticed. I think that's an idea. And I mean, it is easier to abduct somebody from a rural area than it is a big city because, somebody else will notice in the big city, whereas, you might not have a truck go past your house if you live in you know, Colorado.
Right. We see horrific acts of violence committed by people have that same effect, especially at this time. Um, it was a whole lot easier to make someone disappear if you're in the woods in Washington than if you are in, a big city. But um, still the violence is prevalent. Um, so the aliens have some nefarious purpose. They just want to see our destruction, and that's where we start to get like this rallying effort, and a great speech by our president.
Yeah, it is a great speech.
Yes. So some more behind the scenes lore. You might not know this because this movie came out, but there was another movie um, released years before this that was also titled Independence Day. Um, and this movie, when it was being developed and marketed, it was known as ID4, um, and in the early stages. But then once uh, the studio wanted to call it like Doomsday or something like that, to communicate like a scary message. And the creators of the film, Roland Emmerich, he was against that. He really wanted Independence Day, and so the speech that Bill Pullman gives, where he's like, this isn't just the 4th of July for us Americans. This is our Independence Day from the aliens. This is the day for our freedom. Seeing that scene convinced the backers and studio executives to go ahead and be able to call this film Independence Day.
Wow. So the whole speech was just a marketing ploy for the movie. That's great. Love
Uh,
it.
yeah, a marketing ploy for the behind the scenes. Um, this movie was also very quickly put into development. Um, about 3 days after the screenplay was like shown to people and greenlit, it was began pre-production, which is something that certainly wouldn't happen nowadays with movies taking years and years to develop, and these sort of big blockbusters and franchises taking you know so many years to just start being made. um,
Yeah.
the 70s, 80s, 90s in movies were a much different time. I'm sure as this series goes on, we'll be talking a whole lot more about that, especially in regards to, analyzing the blockbusters to come, after this point.
Yeah. I mean, I was, Titanic's been in the news a lot lately, and realizing how many Titanic movies came before Titanic, and the 1997 Titanic, and many of them were actually called Titanic also. So like the name of a movie, means a lot. And had if Independence Day was named anything else, I don't think I would associate it with the 4th of July at all, even if that speech was in there.
Yeah, they did a great job capturing the patriotism, um, and capturing America's eye. So we have the poster on screen, and I think the poster does a really good job of being like, oh, like this is a big movie, because we see the spaceship about ready to destroy the Empire State Building. We see New York, which is a big symbol of America. We see Independence Day. Like it tugs on a lot of uh, feelings and ideas of America. Um, and having the speech by the president really helps solidify that, and makes that connection. And I'm sure, in the theater, people were cheering.
Well, and a huge theme in the movie is, as we go into the final scene of everybody pulling together, of pulling people out of the woodwork who can fly a plane, in order to, really get the aliens in the end. And the pulling together and lack of derision is such a interesting theme that I don't think, had this movie been made 10 years later, would have been as successful.
Right. 10 years later, in 2006, I think it would have had a much different feel to it. A scene like that.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and 10 years earlier, we would have been fighting with the Russians about what we were supposed to do. So, the lack of cooperation, uh, that could have been there and is not in the movie, I think is just as significant as the amount that there is. That they stayed away from, detractors, and um, in favor of uniting against a common enemy.
yes, if anybody were to, if any of our main characters were to have been like, oh well, this is hopeless and bad, I feel like that would have really pulled down um the movie.
Well,
Uh,
I
the,
think
the
that, having like a hopeless attitude is would have been okay, but having a no, you're doing it wrong, the French are doing it better, or some shit like that, I think that would have made it a different movie.
I see. Yeah,
If there was like infighting and fighting over like the plan, and how to proceed, especially coming off of watching The Days, where you have a lot of that infighting over, a similarly serious issue. um Whereas, in this movie, we everybody bands together in a nice, happy way to produce a happy ending where we kill all the aliens and survive to live on to destroy the planet ourselves later.
you made it bleak, Kate.
Hey, I'm in just that kind of mood, sorry.
Uh, one of the characters we've been following through this story is cousin Eddie, uh, Randy Quaid. I don't know what who he plays, but he's cousin Eddie to me, because another movie that was constantly on the television were the vacation films.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
He also drives an RV in this movie, so it works.
yes, he very well could be.
The Griswold cousin Eddie.
Yes. So yeah, so he drives around in an RV. He takes his family to one of these like places where like people are gathering as almost like refugees. He's very much our civilian that we're viewing the film through. Um, and in the original cut of the movie, at a certain point, he goes, well, America's not going to let me help, so I'm going to have to take this into my own hands. And he gets in his crop dusting biplane, steals a missile from the United States government, and goes on his own suicide mission. Uh, this read really well in test screenings. The audience, was all for it because it showed like a common man being able to like take up arms and be a hero. Um, However, it didn't really work well when you consider a biplane flying like a fighter jet, flying around them and being the thing that saves the day. It's a little bit too silly, a little bit not as much grounded in realism. So some scenes were reshot in which it's revealed that Cousin Eddie had been a pilot at some conflict, probably I don't remember if it's mentioned, but I would imagine Vietnam.
Yeah, I
Um,
wouldn't say not that they mentioned Nam too.
yeah, because that would have been another thing that was big in America's conscious, and especially for the people that were, growing up, our main characters.
Yeah.
Um, and then he, has a missile that won't fire, and he's just like, I'm going in. I'm gonna do this. Tell my kids I love them, and then he delivers a great line of hi boys, I'm back, uh, to really cement his abduction, and to bring his arc full circle of like nobody believes him about him being abducted by aliens. Everybody just thinks he's a drunkard and a loser, and then he turns that around and everybody not only believes him but believes in him. It's a really great
Yeah,
story to help end us on.
and it's very heartwarming. It's a heartwarming moment that kind of like I think that that's one of the ingredients that the summer blockbuster needs is the heartwarming moments, the people doing something good for each other, in this landscape of just terrible things happening. And so I think that is just a great moment that they built in there, and it made us following him around in his ineptitudes worth watching.
Absolutely. Um, I think key, especially going back to Jaws, is having like some kind of family dynamic in these movies that helps keep you immersed and grounded. Well, we don't all have families like Cousin Eddie or like Jaws. Uh, it it very much is something that we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form. And I think Cousin Eddie was, a good stand-in for that everyman of having that like eccentric guy who has some problems and things that is still able to do great things.
Yeah, and it's a redemption story for him.
Yes, so he goes in and he blows up one of the alien spaceships, and then that's able to give the government and everybody like a key to like, okay, if you shoot a missile or crash into like the main big glowy sky bit, then the alien ship will be destroyed. And that's what's able for the governments around the world, the fighter jets and whatnot, to be able to successfully take down the aliens and stop the invasion.
Did we talk about the computer virus?
Uh, no, I was thinking about that. So we have a
You skipped a
scene.
step.
Yeah, so we have a scene before this where Chef Goldblum and Will Smith go in the crashed alien spaceship from Roswell and are able to pilot that. Um, and it at some point gets automatically overwritten by the mothership to commence a docking sequence. And it is there that Chef Goldblum is able to upload a virus onto the mothership to disable the shields, which is what makes them vulnerable to Cousin Eddie's attack.
Yeah, which is such a fun idea that the alien spaceship didn't have any firewall protection.
Yeah, in the 80s and 90s, we have a lot of like hacker man, like, the nerd comes in, types very loudly on the computer and is able to, make a virus or take down governments or get secret information. And here we have that trope played out, and it's silly, yes, but also if it were possible, it would be something unexpected. Um, I think, to some people it doesn't make sense, but Jeff Goldblum is able to like understand their signals. That happens early on in the movie. I think there are some deleted scenes that explain that like either we've developed some of our technology off of them, or we've been able to study it, or it's something simple like binary, or something that would help us to interface with it.
Well, and I guess the bottom line is in 1996, most people weren't even as computer literate as I am right now. So the no one was questioning this idea at the time. Whereas now we might be like, I'm not sure how that would work. Especially knowing how many computer languages we've come up with, wondering how to interface with a alien computer language is,
Right. And all sorts of strides in technology are really what have dated some of these movies and how those interact. Um, I think if you were to make this movie now, it would be a lot different in how they would be able to like upload a virus or something like that. Um,
yeah, I think we would need more time. Um,
yeah,
Definitely
it's
more hackers.
a lot more hackers, not just Jeff Goldblum with an apple. Um, because now we've had we talked about Dune in the last episode. Not the film, but just our expectation. One of Denis Villeneuve's other films, Arrival, has the whole movie centered around how do we communicate with aliens. And
Yeah.
one of our favorite books, uh, Project Hail Mary, also includes a lot of that sort of thing of how do we communicate with the unknown. Um,
Well, and that being the biggest challenge for any alien contact, and like even in the beginning of this movie, they try to use lights to communicate with the giant spaceships, and the spaceships, set them on fire, because they had no will to communicate. They did not care about us. They wanted us to die. So, but communication with the fourth kind is always a big part of science fiction and how we're going to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that really, comes back to like human ingenuity and us being, very optimistic, and scientists, and as scientists, and especially people who enjoy sci-fi, are always like, hypothesizing of like, oh, well, what could this be? Playing out these fantasies. And I think this is a more bleak one that's still grounded, in reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. It holds up well for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. We watched this movie together a couple years ago, and that was probably one of the first times I'd actually seen the movie in its entirety. Um, but it still holds up. Some of the effects hold up. We talked a lot about the miniatures. Some of the composite shots don't hold up as much. Composite shot is so you take the miniature of the Empire State Building that's exploding, you take the city street that is exploding down, and you take the people in the foreground running away. Those would all be, about three separate things that you would layer together, um, back to front. And it's often hard to be able to accurately recreate lighting, especially at this time, because they didn't have that technology yet that we have now. Now we have these, big, like almost holodeck Star Trek things of big stages of just lights that, you can put the background on and it'll illuminate people correctly. Um, we have all sorts of post-processing and lots of labor and animators and people working to make those transitions as seamless as possible.
Yeah, and I think that while it's not the best, it's certainly better than a lot of other films in their attempts. Like they put in a lot of time and effort to make it as good as it could be, especially in this early stage. I mean, they did all this in like 95, 96, so like early 96. The movie was probably done by the Super Bowl. So, or done-ish.
Yeah, so that's something interesting about trailers is often trailers are edited and cut by different people who are editing the movie. So typically they're using um, what in the movie are done sequences, what they know is going to be in there, to be able to hype it up. Um, so yeah, I'm sure there was a push there to have a lot of the movie done before this happened.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially the key scenes like the blowing up the different buildings because those were in the trailer. So
right. So if you're looking for, an entertaining summer action flick to watch with the family to celebrate America's independence from the rule and um, command of others, this is a good pick. It's patriotic, it's fun, it's pretty family friendly, has a lot of explosions, and aliens are pretty badass.
yeah, yeah, they did a great job. The lighting, the animation, the and it doesn't have a lot of the really dumb lines that a lot of these kind of movies end up having. A lot the dialogue's good. It's there's a lot of great one-liners as opposed to just like that didn't come off well kind of one-liners. So highly recommend if you haven't seen it. We spoiled the heck out of it, but that's fine. You should have seen it in the last 24 years or 34. No, 24. 28? I don't know. Math.
Yes.
Come on.
So
Yeah.
Uh, so now we come to the next segment of our podcast, Mystery Aliens. Are they among us? Uh, Caitlin, do you believe that aliens are among us?
I believe fundamentally that there are aliens in the universe. Whether they want to come here, whether they can come here, whether they care at all, that is doubtful.
I'm of the same mindset. I think undoubtedly there exists stuff out there in the vast expanse that lies very, very far away.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's a big universe. Like,
it's
there's a lot of shit out
huge. And if we're the only ones, that's just as equally as terrifying as in a few days they aliens show up and destroy us.
there. For sure. Yeah, the existential dread of us being the only life in the universe, like, whoa. That is some bad choices somebody made along the way.
Yeah, because we're blowing it.
For
Uh,
sure.
so I want to talk a bit about aliens and where a lot of these ideas and tropes come from. So uh, if you look up in the sky right now, I can assure you there are a couple things. If it's the daytime, you're seeing clouds. Clouds we now know are water vapor from the water cycle. Uh, Several hundred years ago, we didn't know that.
What did we think clouds were?
The heavens,
Okay.
um, the sun. We've always, the sun in the history of humanity. We've debated whether we're rotating around that, whether it's above us, where that is. We've always wondered our place in the universe. We've been able to see, the stars in the night sky, planets, meteors, comets, all sorts of things like that that we don't that we didn't necessarily knew what they were, as much as we do now. And I think as we as a people understand more science and are able to explore more ideas and study things, we learn better what stuff is.
Mhm.
Um, so one thing that I've written in our notes, there's Halley's Comet, which passes by Earth, every 74, 75 years, and it's something that we can see. It's something that we have reports of people seeing throughout history, or at least reports of people seeing something, and then us with our knowledge we're able to say, oh, that's what it was. Um, things like meteors, other debris falling to Earth. That's something that if people saw a long time ago, yeah, they'd be scared, they'd be horrified. They'd say, oh yeah, that's angels and visitors from the heavens coming down, because they don't have the context that we have now.
Yeah, they would make it into more of a supernatural occurrence than uh, extraterrestrial life because they didn't understand that there was a world outside of Earth.
Right. Humans have always been very human centric because that's what we know. Uh, it's it's very easy to see something that you don't understand. Even now, it's easy to see something you don't understand and attribute it to something supernatural, something above and outside of your understanding. Um, you know, Things wash up on the beach and we think, oh, there's sea monsters, not just something in an extreme state of decay that we don't understand because we're not biologists. Um, there are phenomena that we don't understand because we're not meteorologists. You know, even something like lightning, that's scary and has been construed as a sign from God that we've been doing something wrong. Um, Christopher Columbus supposedly famously tricked natives into believing him by being able to predict an eclipse or a blood moon that happens because he understood the stars and celestial bodies at that point. And it's this idea that there's still a lot of unknown to our world. There's still a lot of unknown to the universe and things like that. And we very often subscribe them to be alien or extraterrestrial or ghosts or things that are fanciful and stuff like that, because it's far more interesting that those things are aliens, that we're special and we're being visited, than we're just having nightmares, or uh they're just artifacts in a camera or a weather balloon.
Yeah, or just yeah, natural occurrences based on atmospheric pressures and whatnot.
Yes. So in our lifetimes, and especially in the 20th century, people claiming to see UFOs has spiked dramatically. Um, and that can really just so basically be attributed to we've been putting stuff in the sky. Um, Anything from, the White brothers to, going to the moon. We've been putting stuff in space. The space race, launching nukes, missiles, civilian aircraft, all sorts of planes. The advent of commercial airliners. All of that has happened in the last 100 years and has definitely contributed to a lot of anxiety in people, and looking up into the sky, and especially after the Second World War and during the Second World War, of people seeing just like huge battles in the sky of you know fighter jets and tracer rounds and all sorts of like terror that they witness, just contributes to this anxiety of looking up into the sky, seeing a few lights on an airplane and going, that's not an airplane, that is something that's here to destroy us, or that's something scary, or that's something outside of my realm of understanding. And certainly with the various governments of the world, they're going to develop their own airplanes. They're going to develop things, like drones. We have meteorologists studying stuff with weather balloons. Like, these are things that a civilian is not going to have direct knowledge and understanding of, and it might scare them.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, as we talk about people living in rural areas, in, areas like New Mexico in the desert, because of the flatness and where you're at, you can see for a very long distance, and that can change your perspective. There's also like I was reading about mirages and how like we don't really understand how mirages happen, but they're real and they can just change the perspective of where you think the horizon line is, and those kinds of things that can really, be spooky and be unknown, and sometimes what you see is not actually reality, and that's terrifying, but it also contributes to these ideas of alien, abductions and alien spacecrafts and UFOs.
Yes, exactly. Um, humans, we have a great job of seeing faces in things because that's a defense mechanism. It's very good to see, a face in the brush of the woods or in the jungle because you can identify predators. In the same way, we see satellites and lights in the sky and things like that. It's like, oh, that's a predator. Um, in the Cold War, you might think, oh, well, that's the Russians coming to nuke us, or that's the United States coming to nuke us, or now you're like, oh, that's spies coming to spy on me because I'm interesting, I'm special. Um, so one reason I wanted to bring this up is recently there's been some whistleblowing by a United States Air Force intelligence officer who has claims that there's a government UFO retrieval program that operates outside of the bounds of our U.S. government. Um, and this is, really where we get into like this echo chamber of absolute insanity. Ever since this guy's come forward, internet boards, news outlets, they've been reporting on this story and just, having such elaborate claims, like the U.S. government has non-human spacecrafts or dead pilots, or in Benito Mussolini's time, the Vatican covered up a UFO retrieval mission. Um, that there are football-sized crafts that defense contractors are, studying these and reverse engineering. That the UFOs have, malevolent activities, um, and there are even like crazier claims of like, oh, these machines are able to manipulate gravity or produce exclusively clean energies, or when you open them up, they're, a million times bigger on the inside. It's all, you know, it's extravagant, it's fanciful, it's there to elicit a reaction from you and be able to go like, what the hell are they hiding from us, what's this all about, when, in reality it could be as simple as, yeah, we've shot down some enemy spy technology, and we have defense contractors who power the military industrial complex that is America. Yeah, we've hired them to like look at it and understand it, like.
Or, there are our own experiments that went haywire. I mean, we are certainly not infallible when it comes to doing stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we tested nuclear arms on, US soil. Like you could, be in Las Vegas and see the lights of the bombs going off, or you could go to, the Bikini Atoll and be exposed to nuclear, radiation still. And it's like, uh, we as humanity have, well, one, we've been able to come up with all of these stories on, who's out here to destroy us, but we've done the best job. And some of the best horror and things of that nature are not necessarily things we've created in fiction, but have been things that we've experienced and created for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, we are a great species for doing that. Sorry, I was gonna say something even more bleak.
Yeah, I really think like that's almost where like this sort of topic is heading, where if you want to believe in UFOs and you want to believe that aliens are out there, and you want to believe that like these phenomena and these things that people claim to see, and these orbs and photos and things like that, if you want to believe they're aliens, that's almost more hopeful than the possible reality that they're malicious actors in our own government or other governments or things like that. Um,
Yeah, and I think that the other bleak angle to look at there is like, oh, they have this alien technology that is clean, and anti-gravity and like blah blah blah. Well, why aren't we, harnessing any of that for our own purposes? And the other question being like, well, we have access to this technology. We know how some of this works. Well, why don't we use what we already know and apply that to our current situation? But again, capitalism is shaking its head at us and saying that no, coal is the way to go.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, like, what would be the motives of these aliens sending all these like probes or machines or crash landing here? Like, why are they doing all of these things if they're not going to make their presence known to everybody? It seems kind of selfish. It seems,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, especially if because what the like bulk of UFO sightings happened after World War II.
yes, I'd say that that's accurate. One half of that is the technology and records keeping. The other half is like people opening their minds to this sort of ideas, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, if aliens have been like watching us for 80 years, like yeah, I would have thought that they would have tried to make contact by now, in a better way. But I mean, they also might be looking at us like, ugh, I'm not sure we want to contact these losers.
Yes. Examining, because we're big sci-fi fans, we can examine all sorts of different media to see how they, characterize aliens. And, sometimes we're, we're the science project. Sometimes we're a new discovery. Um,
Sometimes they want to add us to their hive mind, and they do that in cool and interesting ways.
yeah. Um, I think all of this just comes down to we're humans are immensely creative. We have a strong desire to be bigger than we are, and we use these stories of meeting and interacting with beings beyond our comprehension to, um, in Independence Day's case, show that we're better than them. um, Show that we're able to come together to do something good rather than to destroy, even though the good thing we're doing is destroying the bad thing that's destroying us. I don't know. It's all kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah, and the other thing that just popped into my head is, like us coming together and unifying as a species to destroy them, whereas they're this alien, creature that uses telepathy like a hive mind and is all one creature in the end. So that's an interesting, thing that they could have pointed that out in the movie too, as like a simile between the two. Like we're coming together to beat them because they're all one, army of one kind of situation.
Right. And I think that that wins out for us in the end. And I think it's proved that even though we're all coming together under the same thing, the individuality of having, Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum willing to go into the alien spaceship and Cousin Eddie willing to, sacrifice his life to see how to destroy it is very much in the spirit of, individuality and coming together to serve a common goal. Um,
Yeah.
So even in the bleakest realities where aliens are here to destroy us, humanity is able to band together and succeed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Seems like the
so
accent for a minute, but whatever.
uh, you know, I hope that we can all use this Independence Day to band together, probably around a grill and some fireworks and good media, and band together to have a good time and hopefully save our world. Um, so we can have a good one for the next generation of peoples, and more importantly, so we can keep making movies because that's the best part. That's the most entertaining thing. That's what we live for. Damn it, is the endless consumption of media.
Yes. Yeah. It's the only good thing about capitalism.
Uh, and on that note, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and listening. And have a great holiday. Continue to enjoy existence and strive for a better world today.
Yeah, or not. Just keep up the status quo. It's fine. the world would burn around us, and we'll all die eventually. So it's cool. Let's enjoy the time we have before we get there.
And on that note, goodbye.
Bye. Talk to you next week.